Have you ever sat across from someone you thought you knew, a colleague, a friend, maybe even the person you love, and suddenly felt that quiet unease? On the surface, they seemed genuine, kind, even admirable. But something in you whispered, this isn't the whole story. That whisper is rarely wrong, because no matter how carefully people polish their image, their true character always seeps through the cracks. Carl Jung discovered you don't need complicated tests to see it. Not years of study, not hours of analysis. He realized that someone's authentic nature is revealed in just two places. Two psychological signatures no one can fully hide. And once you learn to recognize them, you will never look at people the same way again. Think about how many times you've trusted appearances, the confident smile, the polished success, the words spoken so smoothly, only to be disappointed later. We've all been fooled by charm, by confidence, by performance. But what if you could see behind the mask from the very beginning? What if you could sense the truth about a person, not after months of confusion, but within moments of paying attention? Jung once wrote, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely." That's why so many people hide. That's why they wear masks. But whether they know it or not, they reveal themselves to you every single day. And here is the unsettling part. As you begin noticing these hidden signs in others, you will also begin noticing them in yourself, your judgments, your slips of the mask, your unguarded reactions. They are all mirrors, offering you a chance to see what you have avoided. By the end of this journey, you won't just see others more clearly. You will see yourself with new eyes, because the greatest transformation begins the moment you realize this. What unsettles you in them is also what waits inside you. Let's get started. Every person you meet carries two versions of themselves. The one they show, and the one they hide. The self they present is polished, a carefully rehearsed smile, a steady voice, the role they have learned to play. Carl Jung called this the persona, a mask we all wear to survive in the world. Think of it as a costume. It wins us approval. It keeps the peace. It helps us fit into the roles we've been told to play. The dependable parent, the successful professional, the one who always holds it together. And you have worn masks like this, haven't you? We all have. It is part of being human. But Jung discovered something crucial. No matter how carefully someone builds their persona, the mask has seams. And in those seams, the truth always seeps through. Most people judge character by the surface, by appearances, charm, achievements, or even good deeds done in the spotlight. But that is the performance layer. It can be practiced. It can be faked. Authentic character lives deeper. It shows itself in the unplanned moments, the reactions no one rehearses, the judgments they can't quite suppress, the cracks in the mask they don't even realize are showing. If you keep trusting the mask, you will always be disappointed. You will confuse performance with substance, confidence with integrity, calmness with real strength. But Jung's work offers something better, a way to see past the surface and into the architecture of the psyche itself. And once you learn this, you will stop being fooled by appearances. You will begin seeing people not for who they pretend to be, but for who they are. Not with how someone behaves when life is easy, but with whom they cannot help but judge. If you want to see someone's true nature, don't just watch how they act when they're polite. Listen to who they judge. Judgment is never neutral. It is a window into the unconscious. Carl Jung observed this again and again. He discovered that the qualities people condemn most harshly in others are often the very traits they have buried inside themselves. He called it projection, the mind's way of disowning a part of the self by casting it onto someone else. Think of judgment as a spotlight. Where someone shines it the brightest is often where they are hiding the most. David, a successful architect, prides himself on integrity. At every meeting, he complains about his colleague Marcus, calling him fake, manipulative, too charming with clients. Each time Marcus is praised, David's jaw tightens. His voice sharpens. On the surface, it looks like David is simply pointing out dishonesty. But if Jung were in the room, he'd see something deeper. David's harsh criticism isn't about Marcus at all. It is about the part of David that longs to be more socially skilled, the part he buried because he believed charm equals fakery. Jung once wrote, "Till you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." David believes his fate is to resent Marcus. But in truth, he's at war with his own shadow. And projection is not always negative. We also project qualities we admire but haven't claimed. When someone is forever praising others as brilliant, confident, radiant, they may be glimpsing the potential they carry but haven't yet owned. Here's the key. The stronger the emotional reaction, whether contempt or admiration, the closer you are to their shadow. This is why shadow mapping works so reliably. Judgments are confessions in disguise. When someone criticizes with unusual intensity, they have telling you more about themselves than about the person they target. And when you notice this, everything shifts. You stop taking judgments at face value. You start asking, what does this reveal about them? And even more importantly, what do my judgments reveal about me? Because the shadow doesn't just live in others, it lives in you. And if you dare to look closely, your judgments become teachers. But judgment is only half the story. The other half is revealed not in words, but in pressure. In the moments when someone's mask begins to crack. If shadow mapping shows you what a person hides, the second reveal shows you what leaks out when their mask begins to crack. Carl Jung observed that maintaining a persona, the polished image we present to the world, demands constant energy. It is like holding a mask in front of your face all day, every day. Eventually, something happens. The arm gets tired. The mask slips. And in that unguarded moment, the truth spills out. I call this second reveal mask maintenance. Watching how someone behaves when their carefully constructed image is threatened. Take Sarah, a marketing director known for her unshakable calm. In every meeting, she's poised, professional, composed. But one day, a client openly criticized her team's strategy. And in that instant, Sarah's mask cracked. Her voice sharpened, her posture stiffened. She interrupted the client, deflected blame onto her team, and even jabbed at the client's previous decisions. The calm, collected professional vanished. What appeared instead was defensiveness, insecurity, and desperation to protect her image. Jung wrote, "The foundation of all mental illness is the unwillingness to experience legitimate suffering." Sarah couldn't bear the sting of criticism. So instead of absorbing it with presence, she lashed out, revealing her raw character more clearly in that moment than in years of polished performance. Here's the truth. Mask breakdowns don't only happen in high-stakes meetings. They happen in the small, ordinary moments of life. When someone's kept waiting too long, when their joke falls flat, when their phone dies and they cannot escape into distraction. Tiny cracks appear, and through them, the real person emerges. Jung realized that authentic character is not revealed in prepared performances. It is revealed in unprepared reactions. The most integrated people, the ones he called individuated, show little difference between their mask and their authentic responses. But for most, the gap is wide. And under pressure, the mask always shatters. So watch carefully, because in the way someone handles stress, discomfort, or sudden criticism, you glimpse the blueprint of their soul. But why are these cracks and projections so revealing? Why do they bypass the mask and go straight to the truth? To answer that, we have to look deeper into the architecture of the psyche itself. If this content is making sense to you, click the subscribe button and subscribe to the channel. Thank you for your support. You might wonder, why are these two signs so reliable? Why do judgments and unguarded reactions reveal more than words, smiles, or even good deeds? Carl Jung spent his life mapping the hidden architecture of the psyche. He discovered that much of who we are operates beneath awareness, like an underground river shaping the land above it. We live on the surface, but it is the currents below that direct us. When someone judges with unusual intensity, it is not random. It is their unconscious projecting rejected traits onto another. The harsher the judgment, the more powerful the projection. That's why it feels so charged, so sticky. It is the psyche wrestling with itself in the mirror of someone else. And when the mask slips under pressure, that's the unconscious again. Because holding up a persona takes energy. And stress, fatigue, or sudden criticism drains that energy fast. What bursts through in those moments, defensiveness, anger, withdrawal, is not a performance. It is raw, unfiltered truth. Jung once wrote, "Thinking is difficult. That's why most people judge." He wasn't mocking weakness. He was naming a fact. Judgment is easier than reflection. Defensiveness is easier than vulnerability. Attack is easier than integration. But think of it this way. A person who is truly confident doesn't waste energy tearing others down. A person secure in their success doesn't feel threatened by ambition. And someone who has accepted their own imperfections doesn't lash out when criticized. That is why these reveals are so dependable. They bypass the performance layer. They pierce through the story someone tells about themselves and expose the blueprint of their inner world. And here is where it gets even more powerful. When you combine the two signs, judgments and mask breakdowns, you gain access to a third test, one that does not just reveal character as it is, but reveals whether a person can grow beyond it. Judgment shows you the shadow. Mask breakdowns show you the cracks. But there is a third reveal, one that doesn't just expose who someone is today, but whether they can grow tomorrow. Carl Jung discovered that the true measure of character is revealed when the unconscious is brought into the light, when someone gently reflects your shadow back to you. How do you respond? Do you deny, attack, and defend? Or do you pause, breathe, and dare to say, "Yes, I see that in myself"? Think back to David, the architect who resented Marcus for being fake. Imagine asking him, "Do you ever wish you were more charming?" His answer would reveal more than years of observation. In the defensive pattern, David might snap, "Are you saying I'm fake? That's ridiculous. I'm authentic, unlike him." This reaction shows rigidity, fear, and inability to face his own complexity. Jung observed, condemnation does not liberate. It oppresses. David's defensiveness is a cage, one he built himself. But in the integrative pattern, David might pause. He might say, "Actually, yes, sometimes I do wish I was more socially skilled. Maybe I envy Marcus, even if I don't like his approach." That single admission shows humility. It shows growth. It shows he is willing to let the shadow become a teacher instead of an enemy. Jung wrote, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." The integration test is exactly that. Facing the darkness within and refusing to turn away. And here's the crucial truth. People fall into three broad types. The unconscious type, blind to their projections, hostile when confronted. The aware but defended type, intellectually aware, but unable to integrate. And the integrated type, willing to hold their shadow with curiosity and grow stronger through it. This third reveal is the most powerful of all, because it shows whether a person is capable of transformation. And this test is not just for others, it is for you. Because the way you respond when your own shadow is reflected back is the clearest mirror of your capacity for growth. So how do we use this in daily life? It is one thing to grasp these patterns in theory. It is another to live them out. in love, in work, in family, where relationships test us every single day. Carl Jung believed psychology wasn't meant to stay in books. It was meant to guide us through life. He wrote, "The meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed. And nowhere is that reaction more powerful than in our closest bonds." Listen to how your partner speaks about others. If they complain endlessly about selfish coworkers, they may be wrestling with their own boundaries. If they condemn needy friends, they may be hiding their own longing for connection. Instead of reacting defensively, you might ask, do you ever feel the same fear in yourself? That one question can turn conflict into intimacy. Watch how colleagues respond to criticism. Do they deflect blame? Do they attack back? Or do they pause, reflect, and adapt? A true leader, Jung would say, is not the one who looks flawless in success. It is the one who absorbs failure, integrates feedback, and stays whole under pressure. Notice your children's judgments. When a teenager says, "Everyone at school is fake," they may be naming their own struggle with authenticity. Instead of dismissing it, you might respond, "Do you ever feel pressure to act different than you really are?" That small shift teaches them that judgments are mirrors, not weapons. And then there is you, the coworker who irritates you, the neighbor you can't stand, the stranger who sparks envy. Every reaction is a reflection. Each one asks, what part of me am I unwilling to see? This is how Jung's insights become more than theory. They become a way of life, a way of listening beneath the words, hearing the unconscious speak through every reaction, every crack, every judgment. But here lies the danger. Once you learn to see these patterns, the temptation to misuse them is strong. And if you're not careful, insight becomes a weapon. That is why the next step is not about how to see more clearly, but how to see more ethically. Knowledge is power. And like all power, it can heal or it can harm. Carl Jung warned that the deeper we go into the unconscious, the greater the risk of distortion. Because once you learn to see shadows and masks, you may feel a dangerous temptation, the thrill of superiority, as if you have been given X-ray vision into the souls of others. But this is where the path can turn dark. I have seen people take Jung's insights and twist them into tools of control. They become shadow hunters, exposing, analyzing, even humiliating others instead of seeking compassion. They think analysis equals wisdom, but it doesn't. It only makes them blind in a more sophisticated way. The warning signs are easy to spot. You feel proud when you figure someone out. You use psychological insight to win arguments or gain leverage. You judge others more harshly, not less. You analyze everyone around you, but never yourself. If you recognize yourself here, don't panic. Awareness is the first step. Because superiority, manipulation, judgment, these are masks too. Masks hiding the fear of facing your own shadow. Jung wrote, "People will do anything, no matter how absurd, in order to avoid facing their own soul." Sometimes, endless analysis is exactly that, a way to avoid looking inward. The antidote is humility. Remember, every shadow you see in another lives in you. Every crack you notice in their mask is mirrored in your own. True character assessment is not about exposing or shaming. It is about creating space for authenticity. It's about remembering that behind every defensive reaction is a human being doing their best to navigate pain, fear, and longing. And when you hold that truth, your insight becomes medicine, not poison. Because the ultimate lesson of Jung's work is this: the people you analyze are also analyzing you. This is the mirror effect. And once you understand it, everything changes. Here is the paradox. The more you study others, the more you end up studying yourself. Because every irritation, every judgment, every spark of admiration is a mirror. Carl Jung called this projection. And once you see it, Life itself becomes the most honest teacher you will ever have. Think about the people who trigger you most. The arrogant boss, the needy friend, the family member who won't stop complaining. Why do they get under your skin so deeply? Because they are carrying pieces of you that you've tried to deny. Your anger is a mirror. Your envy is a mirror. Even your disgust is a mirror. I once worked with someone whose constant need for validation drove me nearly mad. I judged them as insecure, exhausting, desperate for approval. But Jung's framework forced me to ask, why does this bother me so much? The answer was uncomfortable. I too was chasing validation, just in subtler ways. I dressed it up as achievement, as humility, even as service. But the hunger was the same. My judgment of them was really a rejection of myself. Jung wrote, "Your vision will become clear only when you can look into your own heart. Who looks outside dreams. Who looks inside awakes." That's what the mirror effect does. It wakes you up. The traits you condemn show you what you've buried. The traits you admire show you what you've yet to claim. And the cracks you notice in others will one day reveal your own. Life becomes a classroom. The irritating coworker is a teacher. The difficult stranger is a lesson. The partner who triggers you most is the mirror of your next stage of growth. And when you realize this, everything shifts. You stop wasting energy blaming others. You stop obsessing over their flaws. Instead, you ask, what is this showing me about myself? That is the power of the mirror effect. It turns conflict into self-discovery. It turns judgment into growth. And when you begin to live this way, you step into a new stage of being, what Jung called the conscious individual. When you begin living with the mirror effect in mind, something profound happens. You stop being pulled into unconscious drama. You step into what Carl Jung called individuation, the journey of becoming whole, becoming conscious. The conscious individual is not flawless. They still feel anger, envy, fear. But instead of being ruled by these forces, they recognize them. They choose differently. This presence is powerful. It transforms relationships without a single lecture. Because when you refuse to take the bait of projections, when you don't lash out under pressure, when you respond with clarity instead of compulsion, people feel it. At first, it unsettles them, but eventually, it draws them in. Your steadiness becomes a mirror of what they long for in themselves. Jung wrote, "The meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed. Your awareness becomes contagious. Your willingness to face your shadow gives others courage to face theirs. Your authenticity becomes permission for others to lay down their masks. But there is a price." Jung warned that awakening can feel lonely, not because you lack people around you, but because you no longer fit into unconscious belonging. You stop bonding over gossip, judgment, shared masks. And for a time, it feels like standing apart. But this loneliness is temporary. It is the passage into deeper connection, because when you live consciously, the relationships you attract are built on authenticity, not performance, on presence, not pretense. This is the transformation. From living as a performer in the theater of masks, to becoming a conscious individual, a steady flame in a world of flickering lights. But consciousness does not come all at once. It arrives in stages, each one revealing a new layer of freedom. So let's walk those stages together. The predictable steps Jung observed on the path of integration. Consciousness does not arrive in a single flash of light. Carl Jung described this journey as a spiral. You circle back again and again, but each turn takes you deeper. At first, you see only the flaws in others, the arrogance, the insecurity, the hypocrisy. You can spot everyone's shadow, except your own. It feels righteous, even empowering, but it is only the beginning. Then comes recognition. You begin to notice, I'm projecting. But even as you know it, you cannot stop. Your emotions still hijack you. You still feel justified in your judgments, even as your mind whispers otherwise. This is the frustrating middle ground, where knowledge outruns practice. Slowly, awareness moves into the present. You start catching yourself in the act. The judgment rises, the mask trembles. And this time, you pause. That pause is freedom. It is the space between trigger and response. Here, you begin choosing differently. You breathe instead of snapping. You grow curious instead of condemning. You allow your authentic self to emerge even when it is uncomfortable. Jung wrote, "We don't really heal anything. We simply let it go, and in this stage, letting go becomes your practice." Finally, there is integration, not perfection, but wholeness. The ability to hold paradox, to carry light and shadow together without denial. You no longer need to split yourself into good or bad, worthy or unworthy. You accept the full spectrum of your humanity. And in that acceptance, you become whole. But don't mistake this for a finish line. These stages are not climbed once and left behind. They are cycled through again and again, each time with more awareness, more compassion, more resilience. That is individuation, not escape from the shadow, but relationship with it. Now, as we arrive at the end of this journey, let's bring it all together. A single truth, a single invitation to live more awake, more authentic. We have traveled far together, from shadows to masks, from judgments to mirrors, from blind reaction to conscious integration. And through it all, Carl Jung's message rings clear. The two simplest signs, what people judge and how their mask cracks under pressure, reveal more about true character than a lifetime of performances. But here is the deeper truth. This is not just about learning to read others. It is about daring to read yourself. Every judgment you cast, every defensive reaction you feel, every moment your own mask trembles. These are not failures. They are invitations, opportunities to step closer to the person you were always meant to become. Jung wrote, "Man's task is to become conscious of the contents that press upward from the unconscious." That is your task too. Not to be flawless, not to be endlessly calm, but to be conscious. To see your own patterns clearly, and in seeing them, choose differently. Because the world does not need more performers. It does not need more masks. It needs conscious individuals, people willing to walk through the fire of their own shadows and emerge with compassion, clarity, and presence. And when you choose this path, you don't just transform yourself, you become a beacon. Your awareness ripples outward, changing your relationships, your family, your community. You become what Jung called a culture creator. Someone who shows by example that authenticity is possible in a world addicted to performance. Every time you feel judgment, ask, what is this showing me about myself? Every time your mask trembles, ask, what truth am I afraid to reveal? Every time you are tempted to use insight against others, turn inward and ask, where am I still avoiding my own shadow? This is not just psychology. It is a movement. A collective awakening into deeper presence, deeper compassion, deeper humanity. And if you are ready to walk this path, not just with Jung's wisdom, but with a community of seekers choosing consciousness over unconsciousness, then join us, not just by subscribing, but by stepping into the shared work of becoming more awake, more authentic, more human. Because in the end, the character you see most clearly will always be your own. Thank you for watching. The next video is more important. Don't miss that. I'll see you there.